What part of the city budget would you cut before others if more cuts are necessary?
I'm not sure that that's that I can come up with a reasonable answer for that. There's orders of magnitude. If all the stores in Folsom close tomorrow, that's one scenario. If we're looking at a $100,000 shortfall, it's a completely different scenario. You need to look at the magnitude of what the issue is and basically make a decision based on the issue that you're presented with. There's a variety of things that could be looked at depending upon the magnitude of the problem. If somebody's looking to hear me say I would cut the police department first, or the fire department first, or the parks department first, I'm not gonna do that. It depends on what the issue is, what the value is, and how can we find a reasonable solution to it.
It's not something you can do in a vacuum in a candidate form. There's just too much information, too much forecasting, and as we said before, too much reaction that's going to cause an action someplace else, and vice versa. One thing I will point out, however, just again to kind of put the magnitude of what we have been faced with, with the raise from the state and federal government on our budget, over the last 5 years, we've remained constant in the percentage of our expenditures for police, fire, public works, and community development. That should tell you those are our 4 priorities. And so the maneuvers we've made, the changes we've made, and if you want to call them cuts, you can certainly say that, because certainly our budgets are a lot different now than they were even 10 years ago. But one constant thing we've done is maintain the same percentages across the board for those 4 vital areas that I just told you. And for me as a council member, given all the information that may be the same as what we just looked at, I'm going to look at those 4 vital areas first, because that's what the community has told us to look at. We're going to use, at least myself as a one council member, and we use those same 4 areas as my baseline, and then start from there.
Yeah, I'm not reading the newspaper up here. This is a 1976.
What's your sideburns?
I know. Now this is a 1976, and Miklos is on the council. Yeah. No, what I'm looking at here, they actually have some budget information here from 1976, and this question is very good, because this was back when our total expenditures, our operational budget for the city of Folsom, this includes our general fund, which is our sales tax, property tax, but also our utilities, our sewer, water, solid waste, is about $150 million a year right now, maybe 140. In 1976, it was about $4 million, so much, much less. But they've got a pie chart here showing the breakdown of expenses, very similar to what we have here today. And I think that's a lot of what has helped Folsom throughout the years, is there's been this balance of priorities. I can assure you, if I have to cut $5 million tomorrow, I'm not extracting it and going to cannibalize one department specifically. Each department exists because it brings a lot to this community. And you could talk about parks and recs, or streets, or police and fire that people like to, appropriately put a lot of emphasis on, but it's that balance. Parks and recreation. A lot of people think, gosh, we didn't used to have a whole lot of parks. We had our zoo since the early 1960s, and the rodeo grounds, they called it the amphitheater in the early days. These were things that the city, the community back then, chose to spend money on. And I will always defend that balance of expenses. I don't care where our budget goes, we need all those pieces in some form or fashion. And the one thing we've seen as these budgets have decreased on us the past few years is how much this community is willing to step up and fill some of those gaps through volunteerism, donations, and tough economic times. So I think it's just a great question, a perfect example of what makes the community great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have to work together to come up with a list of priorities and stand by them. I think it also, as I've said before, we need to be creative about different options. So if push comes to shove, worst case scenario, we need to do something. Maybe an alternative is to think about different ways of doing it. Some people have mentioned contracting out some services. As long as the service that we're used to and we're accustomed to and what we're paying for is not significantly affected, maybe that's something we should consider if it does help lower costs and help balance our budgets. Thank you.
And Alex.
I think that just having a balance is the perfect thing to do here. The priorities are pretty much set by the residents, and I believe the council has done a great job at keeping those priorities to meet the residents of Folsom. Just making sure that they, across the board, it's equal, and getting the community involved. If there's some areas that are need to be cut down, just getting volunteers. There's a lot of people. Folsom is a great community. A lot of people love to volunteer and to get involved, and being able to use some of those resources. I know Intel does a lot of great things with getting volunteers to get out there and help out. So just reaching out to those resources, making sure we use them to help, keep us from spending the funds that we have. Thank you.
This question actually is the entire basis of my candidacy. I think that the one, and I don't have a magic wand. I think that the pragmatic thing and the thing that any of us would do would be to try and draw down all services in an equal fashion so that we don't cannibalize any one thing, as Steve and Andy pointed out. I think that the piece that we can take from this current economic situation, however, is that rather than reacting on the fly to situations like this, or reacting on the fly to situations where we have growing revenue that we're trying to figure out how to spend, we need to have a playbook for what do we do if X happens. And I don't think that we ever really had a completely clear picture of what the risk to our revenue actually was. There was a recognition, because we do have a reserve fund, that it could fluctuate, but there certainly wasn't a recognition that it could be completely decimated in the course of 24 months. And I think that, as painful as that may be, the great energy that we put into planning south of 50 and preserving, working on historical issues in Folsom could also be expended on preparing for how do we control the budget when times are good, and how do we prepare for when times are not so good.